You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Without further ado, the Dear Friends podcast. Dear friends, spill your woes to your musical family. Dear friends, they will take your questions and turn them into nuggets of wisdom and anecdotes in an otherwise cynical world. Dear friends.
Hi, I'm dear friend Emily.
I'm dear friend Christy.
And I'm dearest friend Jess. And welcome to Dear Friend, a writing and advice podcast for the musical minded. And today, we've got a very interesting write-in. Are you guys ready?
Oh my gosh, I'm
Absolutely.
so excited.
Let's do it.
Okay. So this is from Ambrose Kemper, who wrote in saying, Dear friends, what are your 5 favorite Sondheim musicals?
Like,
good question.
It's like
Very
asking,
leading.
like, which one of my children do I love the most?
Yes. Okay, so we got to set some ground rules here. Are we talking?
Yes.
Are we including lyrics only, or is it just full scores?
I will say in mine, I did not include lyrics only. So I did not include the Gypsies and the West Side Stories and Do I Hear a Waltzes, though I doubt the latter would have made my list anyway.
Okay, so pure Sondheims.
Yes.
All right, score and lyrics.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to start, Emily?
Are we going 5 to 1 or 1 to 5?
5 to 1. We're going from worst
don't
to
know.
best.
Okay, so
I have to
let
write
me
that
preface this by saying this is somewhat of a nebulous list.
Yes.
It has changed at various points in my It has changed at various points in my life. This is where we are with me, in a year where I'll be turning 40. So do with that what you will. I also think when you do a Sondheim show, I think sometimes that can bump something up. So I don't know. So anyway, okay. So my top 5. My number 5, I think, would have to be "Merrily We Roll Along." It is a flawed show, but it holds a really special place in my heart. I did it when I was young. It was the first musical I did right after college with a bunch of old high school friends who were theater kids, and we all put on a production. It took me like 10 years after doing that show to even get the joke of collaborator me, that thing. It took me a really, really long time to get that joke. Anyway, but I love Merrily. I think it resonates more the older you get, and I love it. I think the redo version, the remake, the revival version that I guess started in La Jolla, I think, and went to Off-Broadway, is the superior version, in my opinion. So,
not to drive into a tangent, have you ever listened to the Michael Arden, Adam Wachter, Wayne Brady version? They did an interesting thing. They had like the tether concept from the Spring Awakening revival, Deaf West revival, where they have their younger selves kind of watching them as they mess up and they slowly switch places, and then the adult tethers watches the younger tethers. It was an interesting idea. I think it was very well executed, and it was very close to being the Broadway revival, and then some producers backed out. But Wayne Brady was Frank, or no, he was Charlie, and that was some interesting choices.
I bet he was really good at doing Franklin Shepherd Inc., though.
He nailed it,
Yeah.
but he did mess up some. There's one bootleg, and the one bootleg is the one where Wayne Brady messes up the last number.
Yeah, it's I was gonna say something and it went away from me. Shoot. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. It's also a great show to do. I've seen it in colleges. I've seen a couple community regional theater productions in LA. It works so well with a small ensemble of really good people who can play multiple roles, and it works really well in a black box. I love it. It holds a special place in my heart. And it has one of the best overtures ever written in a Broadway musical.
Hard agree. All right, Christy, what's your number 5?
Oh, geez. Well, I'm probably going to get flack for putting this so low, but it would probably be Company. Because it's one of those shows where I think I like the score a lot better than I like the story or, the concept. I'm kind of I the Sondheim, the more conceptual stuff like Follies and Assassins and things like that. Those are the things that I kind of love more for what they are rather than how I come away from them. But, Company is just a top-notch score. It's got, Being Alive, not Getting Married Today, Ladies Who Lunch. There's a whole bunch of fantastic character pieces in it, and patter songs, and ballads, and it's just a magnificent score all the way around.
That's fantastic. And have you looked into the new revival of Company at all? Like, how do you think that touches your fancy in comparison?
I actually think it's a very interesting way of doing it. Looking at, being single and 35 from the perspective of a woman is, a completely different social and mental thing from, looking at it from the man's perspective, because that's growing through the point where everybody's pressuring you to get married and pressuring you to have kids, because that's a very limited window, obviously, and that's obviously not for everybody. So I think that's a great way of looking at it. I definitely do want to see something where we do see some more same-sex couples, though.
Yeah. Spoilers for the Company revival if you care about things like that. But it was a very hard and fast rule that Bobby couldn't have a same-sex, even intimate implication. So the ending is kind of ruined when Patti LuPone turns to Bobby and is like, in the original version.
Together? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why didn't we ever get together? They don't do that. She's like, why don't you get together with my husband? He'll take care of you. And it just kills that moment so much.
Yeah, Joanne's a swinger. Woo.
Yeah. I only heard
vibe.
the opening. I heard the revival's opening number. It popped up on a playlist. And I think it must have been the London cast. And it threw me a little bit because it was in the exact same key. And so Bobby was forced to have to sing these like really high notes that kind of made me go like, okay. Like, I don't know. It just kind of was like, couldn't she just have opted down here? Like, I don't know. It was weird. I don't know how I felt about it. It kind of was just like, this is distractingly high and piercing right now. Like,
I will say they did change that for the Katrina Lank Broadway production. They brought it down because Katrina Lank has a much lower register than...
Yeah. Because I would feel if you're going to swap genders, that's a place like where I to go back on that Sutton argument from a few episodes ago.
I think, that's a place where you can forgive modulation because, obviously, tenor and soprano and alto and bass, they're not the same. Yeah. They're not the same ranges and registers, so, and it doesn't land the same way.
Yeah.
No. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but yeah. That's a great choice. I don't think anyone's going to give you flack for putting it so low, though, because it is a more complicated...
If you're not into, like, kind of a 70s character piece, you might not dig it,
Yeah, long ago, like decades ago, they did it at the Arvada Center, and I didn't get to see it, but my mom's had season tickets there forever, and she went and she is like, I just didn't care for it.
Yeah.
And, I can kind of see that reaction because it's a very non-linear story and just these little character vignettes.
Yeah,
and
if snapshots of a life.
If you're looking for like, a story that, takes you from point A to point B to point C, you're not going to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the days after Sondheim's death, where that was literally all I wanted to talk about because, mourning and all that.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend... is like, all right, then describe me every Sondheim musical. And I do. And she's like, all these concepts just sound painfully boring when said in like a 3-sentence. Like, Pacific Overture is describing that in 3 sentences. Like, why would you make a musical out of that?
It's like, I promise it's good.
Anything, you can reduce it to, it kind of sounds weird when you reduce it to like those few sentences, though. Mm-hmm.
It is, but it's also kind of like I'm like really trying to sell on it. And I'm like, no, it's really about the westernization
it's really
of Japan.
hard to do an elevator pitch on Company.
I guess I can go next. Mine's a cheat because literally I could not pick one or the other of these musicals to put as my number 5. Like they switched over and over and I couldn't make a justification. So they're both number 5. So my number 5 is both Follies and Merrily We Roll Along. Follies has like some of the best songs Sondheim has ever written, even if you're not a big fan of the interesting staging. But the staging is also probably one of my favorite techniques he's ever done, where you have the younger versions of themselves constantly haunting the older versions of themselves as like literal ghosts, and recontextualizing where they're having the same fight as they did when they were younger and all that. And come on, I'm still here. Could I leave you?
Even
Losing
the
my
cut
mind.
songs are like
Foxtrot.
are like bangers.
The entire Loveland sequence is probably one of my favorite just plays. It's like its own little story inside of this musical. It is incredible. And Merrily, I cannot watch that show without crying. Well, the last time I saw Merrily live, it was just a community production at the University of Michigan with Emily Cutacho, who is now the first Black Christine on Broadway. And I got to chat with her a little bit. I was like, "You were incredible. You were," I forget the wife's character's name, and it was just incredible. I was like, "You're going places."
Oh, Beth.
Next time I hear that name.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Both those musicals can't rank one above the other. They're both equally amazing.
Follies is such an interesting concept for a show because you have to kind of I don't know if revivals do this, but I feel like they have to, because you have to keep it in the 70s because that was the time when these Follies, former Follies girls
I mean, you can't do that now. They'd all be dead. Yeah.
But in the 70s, that was this time when let's see, they would have been like in their 60s.
It was a very
probably.
It was a very difficult it was also a very difficult time for Broadway theater as an institution. A lot of the old houses were coming down. Times Square was, basically where you went to get a hooker and some, and some illegal drugs. So it wasn't. Yeah, it's. You go there and it's a huge touristy place now, but back in the 70s, it was a completely different world.
Yeah, and to have this musical where Sondheim is writing these kind of pastiches to early Broadway Ziegfeld Follies style songs is pretty amazing in the score, because you get the Sondheim-y stuff, but then you get like an amalgam of that is something like Buddy's Blues,
Listen to the rain on the roof.
Yeah.
Go,
or just the beautiful girls, like having them all enter and walk around like.
But then you've got like Waiting for the Girls Upstairs, which is such a very complex number.
Yeah. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, Jess, that you juxtapose Merrily with Follies, because those are both about, kind of disillusionment and looking back on your past. And
you're too young to be
would
disillusioned.
Would I have chosen differently? Could I have chosen differently, based on who I am and what I knew? And
it's weird because I agree. I'm sure these shows will only grow on me as I get older and look back, but I still kind of feel that way. But being in the first half and being like, I want to make changes so I don't regret the change in my life later. Like having the kind of foresight of like, that's the worst case scenario. So live like you don't want that. Don't live with regret right now.
Yeah. Live for the now, kids.
I know that's so pretentious and very 20s guy, but hey, I'm almost at 30, so we'll find out how that goes for me.
Yeah. It's true, though. I mean, very little in my life went the way I thought it was going to when I was 21, but, it's like I don't regret what I did, I learned a lot. I experienced some fun things. I learned a lot about myself, and it's cool.
I mean, I get to hang out with you guys for my 20s. How can I really complain?
Hey.
Like, literally, I'm blessed. I can't be angry unless we, have a horrible falling out. We look back on this, and we're like, how did we get here from there?
Yeah, right?
On that note, we're on number 4. Emily, you want to start us off?
Yeah. Okay, so number 4 for me, maybe you guys will be shocked this is so low, but would be the masterpiece Sweeney Todd. What am I gonna say? It's Sweeney Todd. It's.
I'm gonna reveal this with you. My number 4 is Sweeney Todd too.
Oh, is it? It's one of the best musicals ever written. Mrs. Lovett is definitely a bucket list dream role. I think it gets better and richer again as the more I listen to it. The older I get, the more I'm able to analyze the score and the characters. Just just the better it gets. I love it. It's a big, insane concept of a show and a big, heightened soap opera of a musical. I love it. It's amazing.
And it's also like Sondheim's simplest premise. It is kind of like story before like weird stage technique thing.
Yeah.
It's not like where you have, it's just like the story is the subversive thing, not the weird things we're doing with the craft.
Right.
Which
Yeah,
also
like-
makes it seem
which is,
strange.
Gothic
you know,
horror
kind of-
on Broadway was just
yeah,
not a
and
thing.
yeah, and that's kind of the provenance of it. You know, it goes back to like, you know, a really, you know, the old Penny Dreadfuls where, you know, they weren't trying anything, you know, elaborate or deep, you know, they were just saying, here's a shocking tale of people getting murdered in the barbershop and their corpses are becoming pies. Ooh.
It's also interesting because it's that that kind of thing that I guess happened with Shakespeare, is that you have this lowbrow art form in its time that eventually over the eras becomes this highbrow art form, and the inspiration to this like Penny Dreadful trash story it is, you know, picked up by these guys who wanted to do something new in the realm of musical theater. I mean, there's a reason why opera companies often do Sweeney Todd, even though it's technically not an opera.
It's a very operatic story, and you
with
know, I think we
operatic
also need
voices being used.
Yeah. I think, you know, we also need to give credit to Christopher Bond, who wrote the straight play melodrama, which is what a lot of the Sondheim Wheeler book is based off of. So it's very fascinating the way this transitioned from sensationalist Penny Dreadful to, you know, kind of this melodrama with a conscience to this commentary on, you know, good and evil and obsession and revenge and all these really huge things.
Yeah.
And a lot of people of my generation, this is their first Sondheim. Like, this is really like their first dive into it, especially like edgy teens that really like, I'm going to do this. And say what you will about that Tim Burton movie, it was a great gateway
It's a great
into
gateway.
the musical theater world
Yeah,
for
I
other
mean,
people.
yeah, I will.
I defend it for that reason. If it helped you get into it.
It has its flaws, but you know, I think they did a lot of really good things with it.
Yeah.
You know, they were doing a lot of creative things with visuals and the way they did Epiphany. I mean, we're seeing a lot more of that in the past year or so with musicals that are not afraid to say, okay, these people are going to sing, so we're just going to go a little crazy with stuff for a second.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, oh no, God, they're singing. What are we going to do? I don't know if we can handle them singing.
Everything's so heightened in the show that, of course, they should be singing. It's
Right,
It's
yes.
murdering people and putting them into pies and revenge, deep-seated revenge. You know, it's so great. Love it.
All right, Chrissy, what's your number 4?
Okay, my second is what I would consider the Sondheim Gateway show, and that is Into the Woods. Because it's up, you know, everybody knows the fairy tales. You know, it's ridiculously catchy, you know, singable music, you know, for everybody who thinks, you know, Sondheim is, you know, too, you know, that obtruse, intellectual stuff that you can't latch onto. I'm like, no, come on, you know, Into the Woods. It's time to get, it's fun show. It's got some great solos, on the steps of the palace. I think Moments in the Woods is one of the best, Sondheim character solos of all time. Yeah, and then, you know, it plays with fairy tales for the first act, and then it turns everything on its head for the second act and really makes you think about it.
And then that's what everyone does now. Like, look at Shrek. Happily
Yeah,
Ever
this was
After,
this
all
was
those
ahead
other
of
stuff.
well, not entirely
Disney
ahead of the
does
time
it now.
because-
That's why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, this goes back to like the fractured fairy tales of, you know, the Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons. So you know, that revision has been going on for a while, but I think.
And very much going to the source, or, you know, not the source, but the grim source anyway.
Yes, absolutely. You know, going back to that pre-Disney thing and saying, you know, the stepsisters got blinded and they cut their feet, and, you know, Jack is kind of a thief when you think about it, and Rapunzel's prince got blinded and she got pregnant, and all that dark stuff that gets, you know, sanitized out of them when you try to tell them to kids.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing reading about this in the hat books and all that is Sondheim's like playing with audience expectations, meaning you don't need to see the story, you know the story. So we're just going to tell you what happened after the thoughts going into it and focus on these 3 new characters I made, the baker, the wife, and the witch.
Right.
And really focus on them. And then these other people, we're going to focus on the thematic side of them.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's actually a very good way of doing that, because that kind of, quest to, solve your problem and, following the instructions from the mysterious old witch is very much a fairy tale thing. And they just find it, okay, so you have to find Cinderella's slipper and, Jack's cow and all this other stuff.
Yeah, it's the baker, his wife, and the witch are taking these tropes that you see in these fairy tales. The baker becomes the huntsman. Also where Little Red gets, her treats, and the witch being Rapunzel's witch, but also being another witch. It just shows how interconnected it is, because the whole reason those fairy tales existed in the first place, even going back before the Grimms, was making sense of kind of this medieval world where kids die all the time, and you can only, the best you can hope for is like a magic cat to help you get a nice loaf of bread in a house. Like that's all they wanted. Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. And it teaches these kind of lessons that have been shaped through the ages. And then by the time Sondheim got to them, it all became less about how do you cope with your kids dying young to actions have consequences.
How do you cope with your parents being useless?
Yeah, that's the other thing is there's a lot in there about, parent-child relationships, which, as a parent myself hits a lot differently. The witch's impulse to, want to keep Rapunzel in her tower because, the world sucks. Yeah. And what's going to happen to you when you get out there and see that it sucks. And then, the baker's been abandoned and Cinderella's daddy's useless and, all those things, just coping with, that, your parents screw up sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you're screwed up or you have to screw up.
Yeah, and what is it going to mean for Jack and Little Red, who lose both their parents in the show? By the end? What are these repercussions going to mean for them? It's fascinating. Yeah, just what you do reverberates through the generations.
Yeah. And that children are always listening, even if you don't think they are. Because that is
They may not obey,
true.
but boy, they listen.
Yep, they know what's up.
Oh, yeah.
But my number 4, Sweeney, we said that before. Emily, 3.
Okay, so my number 3 is Assassins. Yeah, Dark Horse, right? To this day, it's one of the best theatrical experiences I've ever had as an actor and musical theater performer. I got to play Squeaky from, I don't know, I guess it was 2008, 2009, something like that. And I just felt so fulfilled as a performer doing that show. We were on stage pretty much the whole time and in an alley staging. And so we got to just be in character for 90 minutes and it was so fun. But that aside, it's one of my favorite Sondheim scores, and I think it's highly underrated. Because everything is the music is all a pastiche of the era of the person singing it. It's Americana in 90 minutes and the dark side of Americana and the subversion of Hail to the Chief and things like that, and how terrifying it all can be, and how everybody has the right doesn't just apply to you pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Even the Looney Loons can do that and cause real damage. I think it's just a fantastic show. It's a weird concept, and I like it. I like that it's just all these weird, horrible figures in history just kind of hanging out with each other and what-ifing, if they would interact with no rhyme or reason. You don't have to explain it. It's theater. And I love that. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a weird fucking show, and I really, really like it a lot. And I love doing it. Again, another really good black box college show that you could do anywhere. My production totally ripped off the Broadway revival, and we had the Zapruder film projected on Lee Harvey Oswald's shirt. We also did the thing where Lee Harvey Oswald was also the balladeer. and that worked really well. I just love it. It's one that I always kind of sometimes forget about, and then when I hear it and it's brought up, I go, oh yeah, I fucking love that show. So yeah, I'm going with that for my number 3, baby.
Good choice. Not in my top 5. I got issues with the book and the score and how they're connected or not connected, but amazing show still.
It's also got one of the best creepy, love ballads in the world. So
Yeah.
10 out of 10. I'm worthy of your love. Amazing.
yeah.
A great choice, Emily. All right, Christy, what's your number 3?
Oh, geez. I am going to go with Sunday in the Park with George, the Pulitzer winner.
Low.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of, personally what I respond to rather than quality. I think it's probably, one of the best constructed Sondheim shows. Just the way the score is reflects the art and, the parallels between, Thoreau and George in the second act and everything that it says about, art as an industry, both then and, in, I guess, in the 80s when it would have been current, I think it's just very fascinating.
I agree.
You will
Sunday's
get no.
amazing.
You will get
no fighting here.
It's top-notch stuff, and I love that we are able to, projections, CGI and projections in theater are kind of a mixed bag, but I love that we can have them for this show, so we can actually have this painting come to life and start out with, the white canvas and then just build it on top of that.
It is really cool to see how different productions interpret that.
Yeah,
because
how they interpret that and how they bring this, artwork to life.
Because I've seen like small black box ones where they're limited, obviously, with their means, and so they make it work within their means. But then, I think I told you guys I saw the Kennedy Center one with Raul Esparza ages ago, and that was at the point in the technology where they would bring these like flat screen TVs down for putting it together instead of cardboard cutouts. So it was like that In Sync. I don't know if you ever saw that live In Sync performance at the VMAs where it's their heads and they're dancing between them. I'm old, but that's exactly what it was like. It was like him walking behind big Raul Esparza.
Yeah, that's a really cool way of doing that.
Yeah.
I love putting it together. There's, Barbara Streisand on the Broadway album does a great rewrite of that, kind of as the lead-off song. Yeah. Which is
putting it together. The review did a
I love
version
the review
of it for
version.
stage.
The one with I know the original one with Julie Andrews.
Yes.
Did it. But then the other one with Carol Burnett.
A little to the right, love.
That was so good.
Yes. I think this show just gets better as time goes on. Like,
it does.
I feel like as
it's
technology will improve, it'll get better.
And there's a great recording of the original cast of Mandy Patinkin and Bernadette Peters that everybody absolutely must watch.
Everyone must watch.
There's also a fantastic recording from the Paris version with Julian Ovenden, and that is also incredible. It shows you a more updated take on it. And there's a Yoho bootleg of the Jake Gyllenhaal production, which is also very different, much smaller. A lot of choices made, but still effective. I think there's a lot of choices.
I would have really liked to see that one, that's for sure.
Yeah, in the UK, like that.
Yeah, and it inspired the best scene in Tick, Tick, Boom. How can you not love it?
Exactly. All right. What number am I on? 3?
3.
Oh, Into the Woods. We talked about that. My number 3 is Into the Woods. Amazing show. No notes. All right. Emily, number 2.
My number 2 is Into the Woods.
No notes.
For most of my life, Into the Woods was number 1. I think as I've gotten a little older, it's bumped down to number 2. But it's my first Sondheim. My mom got me into it when I was like 6 or 7. Watching that PBS Pro Shot.
Oh yeah.
I watched an indefinite amount of time. I mean, I can't even tell you. I could probably just play it all in my head right now, and be right. I went to that reunion they did at Segerstrom a few years ago.
Such a fantastic ensemble on that one too. It's amazing,
unbelievable. It's I've directed the junior version once. It's the junior version ends at the end of Act 1.
Ends after Act 1.
But they're middle schoolers, so it's fine. I wouldn't, whatever. It's fine.
As Orson Welles always said, you can always have a happy ending depending on where you end the story.
Yeah, exactly.
True. That is true.
But it's. I don't know. It's what I would. It's what I would give someone to kind of give them something for like their first Sondheim, maybe, because it is so accessible. It is so great for kids. It's good for smart kids who can handle kind of
Rick and
these
Morty.
lessons.
You know, it's for Rick and Morty kids.
Oh
you know?
God. Kids who can handle nuance, and I think there's more and more of them these days. It's a show I still haven't done, and I don't know how, but someday I'll do it. I could probably do it up until I'm really old and be fine. I mean, come on, we already just talked about it. It's one of the best. So yeah, Into the Woods, my number 2.
All right. Christy, number 2.
My number 2 is A Little Night Music.
Yeah.
The score is, oh my God, the score.
Beautiful.
It's almost like this little Fabergé egg where you just look at it and it's like the craftsmanship is just so beautiful. The way it is written, everything's like in the 3/4 tempo, and you know, the way the duets work, and I cannot say enough about it. It's amazing. I mean, you know, Desiree Armfeld and Madame Armfeld are both a couple of dream roles of mine. Such great characters, and, you know, a great story about, you know, how love is, you know, kind of messed up and complicated and insane, and it's never like it is in the fairy tales, but still, it's a wonderful thing.
And you can age through it. There's a role
Absolutely.
for every
you
age
can literally
level
start
and
off as
every
Frederica
voice
and go from Petra to Charlotte to
Yeah.
Desiree to Madame Armfeld. I mean,
It's wonderful.
you know, God, I mean, who is writing for women now that Sondheim is gone?
Lynn, I think.
Anais Mitchell,
A little
Sarah
bit, yeah.
Bareilles.
I think Lynn writes really good songs for women. Or at least good
Yeah.
character pieces for women.
I wish he'd come back to stage someday.
Let's
That's
give
my
him- let's
big
give him
fear
a
about
couple
Lin-Manuel
years
Miranda.
off. Let's give him a couple years
It
off.
took him 6 years to write Hamilton. I think, you know, we'll probably wait.
He did
He's
so much
probably gonna
this
be a
year.
little-
Just let him take 2022
Yeah, I
off.
mean, yeah.
You've earned it, Lynn.
I mean, I agree, but I don't think we're going to get another stage show from Lin-Manuel Miranda until over a decade.
Probably.
Since the Hamilton
Yeah,
boom.
that's entirely possible. And I think, you know, part of that is him coming to terms with, like, okay, you know, I've written, like, the big thing that everyone's going to remember me for. Now what?
Yeah, what do you do after you write Thriller? You know, like, it's...
Yeah.
What do you do after you know what's going to be on your
Canto,
obituary?
which is, you know, better than any Disney score has a right to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. A Little Night Music, an amazing show.
So
Very,
good, so good.
Yes. Very valuable number 2 choice. Mine is going to be the dark horse number 2 choice. It is Passion.
I knew it was going to be.
I knew we were going to see your passion from you.
I fucking love Passion.
The only one. You're not the
I'm
only
the
one.
only
You're not
one that
only
loves
one.
this
Not the only
show.
one. Tell us why.
The show is just such... It's unlike any of the other Sondheims. I think it might be his only one-act show, unless you're going to include something like Evening Primrose, which I don't. Unless Emily wants to correct me. I think that's...
Assassins is a one act.
I was going to say,
yes,
you just
that's
said
it.
Assassins,
Yeah.
so...
Yeah. So Passion is based on a film, Passion d'Amore, by some French filmmaker. It's just the perfect movie to stage adaptation where it's just like Sondheim watches this movie and he's like, you know what? I want to do this. And this is the only other show aside from Sweeney Todd that Sondheim pursued himself. Reached out to James Lapine, and originally he was going to do a sung-through. He was going to go full Andrew Lloyd Webber with this and put it sung-through. And then he added like the incredible book by James Lapine. It's so dark, so mean, and so like this score is probably one of his more melodic, more dark, more probably the closest thing to Sweeney Todd since Sweeney Todd, as far as like the timbre of the score, and also like the solos, the portrayal of a woman as like this character that is very difficult to fall in love with. It is not an easily to like character, but then you've got these incredible actresses putting their own staple onto it. Patti LuPone, Donna Murphy, Judy Kuhn, and every one of them knocks it out the park. And it gets better every time I listen to it, and I don't care what the haters say.
You don't have to care what the haters say.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this was a show that most people did in Sondheim world didn't like, because this was like probably my 4th Sondheim thing. I think it was like this Sunday, Sweet, and Passion. And I was like, oh, this is something I've never seen before. I get why it flopped. I understand all of it.
It's
Such
in
a
a very odd
departure.
position. I mean, it did win the Tony that year, but it only ran for 90 performances and something like that. And I forget what it was up against on the Tony. That might have been one of those
It was a slow
weird
year.
years where they're like, fine, we'll just give it to this.
Yeah, and it felt in a lot of ways like Sondheim going, well, the 80s, I wrote a lot of really kind of introspective, deep stuff, and then I don't know, let's try this mega musical thing, or let's try this kind. It was more that kind of style, even though it's not a big show.
Yeah, it's almost like his response to, the big melodramatic shows of the 80s and early 90s.
Because it does have a Sondheim, it does have an Andrew Lloyd Webber, Bublé and Schoenberg vibe.
And it has that, Victorian romantic melodrama thing going on, but it's Sondheim.
Yeah.
It's dark and it's complicated.
Yeah.
I like to imagine, he saw something like Andrew Lloyd Webber or what, and he was like, no, guys, this is how you do it. And
I can easily see that.
I think it's just unlike anything he's ever seen. It's strangely one of his more accessible musicals. I'm very glad, and one of the most incredibly shot pro shots. I think
you have a pro shot, so you can see that.
I think it was only one of his original 3 pro shots shot on film. So it is one of the most gorgeously shot. It looks like a movie as opposed to a TV special, the way that Into the Woods and Sunday sadly looked. And I think there was just some weird staging choices that brought it down, deciding just put Marin Maisie with her tits out in the first scene. You didn't need that. That was just...
Who was complaining about that? Come on, she looked amazing. She looked like a painting.
Yes, but this show, it
She's
felt
on her
gratuitous.
back. Oh my God. Yeah, well, come on, baby. It was the 90s.
Yeah. It's like in Bridges of Madison County when Kelly O'Hara is butt-ass naked for no reason.
I saw
in the middle
Kelly.
of the show.
I've told you this story about how when I saw Dracula on Broadway, Dracula looks at Kelly O'Hara all sexy at the end of the first act, and her dress just gets vacuumed off. You just blink and her dress is gone. It was one of the funniest things I had ever seen. And this was before she became Kelly O'Hara.
Kelly O'Hara.
Every time I see Kelly O'Hara, I'm I just remember that time that
I just remember her dress getting sucked off.
From the pit. It was so funny.
It is hilarious. But I just remember in Bridges, she did an interview, right after it opened. She's like, yeah, I just had a baby, but then they insisted I still did the nude scene, so now I'm just doing these nude scenes every night. And it's just her getting out of a bathtub, showing, standing naked, and then putting a towel. I'm like, you didn't need this.
You didn't need to do that. Boo.
All right, we're at number 1s, guys. Emily.
I think no one's going to be surprised by this, but my number 1 is Sunday in the Park with George.
Yeah.
Mine too, so we can do that right now.
It's always waffled, kind of between Into the Woods and Sunday in the Park with George for me, but Sunday has surpassed it. First of all, personally, I am a real sucker for the artist trying to figure out his place in the world story. I don't care if it's overdone. I don't care if you don't like it. I relate to it. I love it. I love all that jazz. I love Tick Tick Boom. I know they're self-indulgent, but sometimes we have to be self-indulgent. Artists are self-indulgent. It's fine.
Yeah. The problem with those stories is that very often they are done terribly.
Yeah, and when they're done well...
when it's done right, and Sunday in the Park in George is done extremely right, it is, something that I think everyone relates to, because, we may not be, artists, starving in a garret, but we are all like, okay, what am I doing on this planet? Am I doing something that matters? When I'm gone, how am I going to be remembered?
Yeah, and there's so much I connect to. The score is brilliant. The whole thing is just... immaculate, perfect masterpiece of a score. I relate to Dot and George in various ways. The being all consumed by your art thing, I've been there, but then I've also been the oh my God, just do this for you. I putting it together has played in my head when I have been a producer plunging toilets while Act 2 is going on. It's just the art of making art. I don't know what else I can say about it. I think it's a great show. I hate it when people used to say this to me growing up. I think people don't do it as much now, but people used to be like, "Why is the second act there?" And it's like, because it's making connections to the modern world. And
right?
I think the second act is amazing. So
I think the second act is better than the first act. I think it's more important.
It's laying the ground. You can't have one. In my opinion, you can't have one without the other. It's not like Into the Woods, maybe, where you could do a junior version.
I think it's important to see the difference between the art world, when you in the 18 whatever when Thoreau was doing this for like exhibitions, and now in the 20th century when it's this institution.
Yeah.
And we've kind of it's kind of framed in this way where you have to be doing something important and meaningful instead of just trying to sell a painting to make a buck.
And then like the idea that you have to Georges Seurat was just trying to get his work seen by anyone, to be appreciated by anyone, but he just wanted to make it. Whereas George in the second act, he's successful doing the same shit over and over and over again.
Right.
And now he's at a crisis where he's like, what do I do now?
How do I be new?
How do I be new? Yeah. And I love it. I relate to it. That pro shot. I remember, I grew up watching Into the Woods, that pro shot. And then I think when I got into high school, my mom was like, you should watch this. I think you'll like it. It's with Bernadette Peters, who was in Into the Woods. And I was like, oh, cool. And I remember just like falling in love with the show. And it kind of blew my mind that a show like that could even exist. And I don't think anything can compare to hearing Mandy Patinkin and Bernadette Peters singing Move On for the first time. It just like imprinted on my soul. I love it. I think it's a masterpiece. It has the Pulitzer for a reason, and it came out the same year as La Cage, so, it got overshadowed by the Happy Fun show. But, the same can be said of West Side Story and The Music Man. So it's my favorite,
Yeah, mine too. But Christy, you're it.
Okay, I'm the odd person out because this is because of the way I'm wired. I went with Sweeney Todd because
I knew it.
I am just a sucker. I am the Victorian melodrama sucker. I mean, you give me this, traumatized man belting to the heavens about how he's going to slaughter his way through society to get back at losing his wife. I eat that up like candy. But yeah, again, it's a melodramatic story, but, it's done in a very, thoughtful and brilliant manner. The score is just magnificent. It has, I believe, the greatest opening number of all time. It is, and some fantastic character pieces. Worst Pies in London is one of my favorite female solos of all time. And Pretty Women, again, one of those songs which is just so gorgeous until you see it in context and you're like, oh my God, this is freaky. And then you have A Little Priest, which just has all these terrible puns, and it's hilarious. So,
God, it's so good.
So
watching
good.
These characters just be so gleeful about how they're gonna murder people, and you're just with them. You're like, do it.
And then at the very end, it's like, you were rooting for this because this is this darkness inside you, and you're like, damn.
Damn.
But only caveat is I have seldom seen Joanna played well. It's especially like on the Hearn at Lansbury. I don't know who's doing it, but she's just kind of got this crazy thing going on. I love that Joanna is kind of like she's on the surface, she's this very typical, Victorian melodramatic ingenue. It's like, oh, take me away from my terrible guardian, please. But when you dig a little deeper, it's like, there's, she's a little smarter and a little crazier than, people are letting on.
Usually it's like opera companies that just cast like whatever basic soprano they have.
Yeah.
And I think I would love to see a production, and I'm sure there are productions that exist because it's been done so much, but I'd like to see one that Joanna, where they really lean into like the Rapunzel's unraveling and Into the Woods, because that's what's happening to her. Of course she runs away with Antony. She lives with a creepy old man who wants to marry her.
And then she spends the entire
she
second
talks to
act
birds all
in
the time.
And then she spends the entire second act in a Victorian madhouse. I mean, if that does not,
Girl.
that is, that's one of those places where if you're not crazy when you go in, you definitely are when you come out.
I do want to say a word of defense to Betsy Jocelyn, who did play Joanna. She was very young, and she would later, about 10 years later, play the witch in Into the Woods very, very well. She is like one of the best witches in the original production of Into the Woods.
I don't blame the girls. I blame the directors for not giving them the direction.
Exactly.
To do this.
I blame the script a little bit. I blame the score a little bit.
I think it's there in the score, though.
I think it is.
It's just a little, Kiss Me, that whole sequence.
Kiss Me, exactly. I mean, the entire time she's like going at 100 miles an hour, and then at some point she's like, oh yeah, I don't even know your name.
Yeah, I think there's something to be explored there that hasn't been mined as much as it should be.
But I think, my favorite cast has got to be the Lupone Hearn concert recording.
That's
hard agree.
Yeah.
I am a big fan of the John Logan revival with Michael Cerveris and Patti LuPone, just for how bonkers off the wall and how strangely well the orchestration still work minimized.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was able to see the immersive production they did off Broadway a few years ago. There were several people. I saw it with Hugh Pinero and Carolee Carmelo. And it was fantastic. It was amazing. I loved what they did with it, and they actually had fantastic pie and mash too. So,
and I saw Hugh Pinero play Anthony back at the Kennedy Center celebration.
Yeah.
So he aged into he's aged into Sweeney. I didn't tell you guys. I didn't tell you guys this, but yesterday I had one of my students sang The Worst Pies in London for my musical theater club at the school where I teach, and she got up to sing, and I teach in this like kind of really janky, kind of creepy little theater that's to the side, and like no one can really find it. And she gets up and she gets up and she was looking at the ceiling, and she's like, "Sorry, I was just looking at the ceiling. There's so many tiles up there missing." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I wonder how long those tiles have been missing." And then she gets up to do Worst Pies in London, and she finishes it, and then a tile falls right next to her.
Jeez.
I think it was a ghost, you guys. I think it was a ghost. I'm not kidding. I just had to tell you that because I'm pretty sure there's a ghost.
People say it's haunted, and who's to say they're wrong?
I think the ghost heard her do Worst Pies in London and was like, yes, tile. Yeah, that's what I want to hear, baby.
Yeah.
Times is hard. Boom.
It literally was like that. It was so creepy. I have video. It's weird.
Okay, I know. I would like to see this video.
I'll show it to you.
All right. On that note, you guys, this was wonderful, and I just want us to recommend one Sondheim song because we like to keep our dear friends' roots. Before we wrap it up, it doesn't have to be a favorite or anything. Just a Sondheim song you think people would go into their weekend enjoying. Emily, you're on first.
Okay. Well, let's go with. Oh my God, my mind is swimming with suggestions. Okay, since I picked Sunday in the Park with George, let's go with Move On, which is one of my favorite songs Sondheim ever wrote. Like I said, I highly recommend the Mandy and Bernadette version. There's just something about the way Mandy Patinkin sings and the life moving on that I've never heard another guy replicate. So, move on!
Yeah. Okay. Geez, I'm actually going to go with my number 2 on A Little Night Music just because there are so many pieces from that I love the construction of it. I think today I'm going to go with Wonderful, which is, this fantastic passive-aggressive, solo where they're complaining about how Desiree is so perfect and, that's the problem because now they can't get rid of her, they can't get over her.
Yeah.
And just the passive-aggressive, sir. I just love that exchange.
Yeah. And I'm going to go basic. Come on. I'm going to go with I Wish I Could Forget You from Passion. More people need to listen to Passion. It's really good, guys. It's got that brilliant, like, kind of passive-aggressiveness that Sondheim loves, where she's asking him to dictate a letter for her so that she forever has a love letter from him in his handwriting, and it becomes a huge plot point later. The song is also just so gorgeous and self-deprecating, and like a poor Victorian child gaslighting a man into falling in love with her. This musical is so bonkers. I love it. All right. Promote your guys' wonderful content for them to find. I'm sure they know about it, but come on, give it to them. Emily, you're on first.
All right. So you can find me on Stealing Focus on YouTube. You can find me at Stealing Focus on YouTube. That sounds better. And you can find me at Emily A.B. Clark on all the social medias. And we also
Does it look like Emily A.B.
It looks like
C.
Emily
Lark?
ABC.
Yes.
It looks like Emily ABC Lark. And we also have a Stealing Focus Patreon. So check it all out, baby.
I'm on there.
You both are on there.
So am I.
Christy.
All right. I am at Musical Hell on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr. I also do, shorter videos where I just talk about cool shows or the sources behind cool shows. And yeah, have a Patreon, have a Redbubble. Check me out, subscribe, buy my merch, do whatever. Just watch a video. I just love it when you watch my videos.
Yeah.
They're good videos. They're all good videos. We are so blessed with video content from incredible creators like these two. When I was your age, I had nothing. There was nothing. I had to make my own garbage.
You've never been my age.
Same.
There was nothing on the internet when I was 5 or whatever. There was no YouTube channels.
Yeah, I would go on my computers and play Paperboy.
I would play the pinball thing on the Windows app, and that would be how. And I'd said thank you for it. I host Musicals with Cheese. You know, it's on the Broadway Podcast Network. It has a Patreon. Who gives a shit? All right, you guys.
We love you, Jess.
None of you care. None of you care.
None of you care. It's not as good as their stuff, so.
We have
We'll
fun.
see you guys next time on the Dear Friends
Bye-bye.
podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dear friends, spill your woes to your musical family. Dear friends, they will take your questions and turn them into nuggets of wisdom and anecdotes in an otherwise cynical world.